Hello, we meet again here in this DMK series, part 2. Check it out. My dear viewers, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to my channel by clicking the subscribe button. And if you like the content of this video, please click the like button and feel free to share my video with others. In this part 2 video, we are going to cover two important events, which are the sharing of Richard's poems and also the Liberty Bonds incident. Let's go. Let's go to the beginning of everything, the beginning of correspondence. But what is correspondence? Correspondence means exchanging letters. Meaning, for example, I send you a letter and then you reply. And then I will reply back. And then we keep on replying to each other's letters. That is what we call correspondence. So, how did the correspondence between Richard and Mr. Kilmer started? It all started because of one person, which is Mrs. Hanson. In the class one day, Mrs. Hanson read Mr. Kilmer's famous poem, which is Trees. Right, so she read it, and Richard was fascinated. Okay, Richard was fascinated, but of course, there are always haters. Abner and Harry, the troublemakers, as we have been introduced, as I have introduced to you in my previous video. Abner and Harry, these troublemakers, said that poetry is sissy stuff. It's like, geli untuk perempuan, something like that. So they said uh, that poetry is sissy stuff. But Mrs. Hanson defended Mr. Kilmer. Mrs. Hanson explained that Mr. Kilmer, at the moment when she was reading the poem, Mr. Kilmer had signed up, had enrolled in the army. To go to the front, to go to the battlefield, to fight for America. Remember, for Americans, when you are a soldier, you are respected. So, you are respected because you are brave to defend your country. So that's why when Mrs. Hanson explained that Mr. Kilmer was brave to join the army to defend the country, right? She silenced the troublemakers. Senyap terus si troublemakers ni, right? And this makes Richard even more fascinated. He loved the poem. When he heard the poem, he loved it. And then now that he knows that someone who wrote this poem is someone so brave, so he finally, see that, oh, not necessarily a sissy. Someone who writes poetry is not necessarily a sissy. Because so far in his life, the only person he knows that is a poet is himself. And everyone calls poetry sissy stuff. So he kind of believed it before, right? Kalau dah sepanjang hidup kamu seorang saja yang buat benda tu dan semua orang kata benda tu salah, obviously you will think that it's wrong too. But now Richard finally we can say found also, right? He finally found someone who is the same like him, and that person is admirable. So Richard now look at Mr. Kilmer as someone, like his idol. Someone, wow, I want to be like this. At the end of the class, Richard went to see Mrs. Hanson. He wanted to borrow the book because he wanted to send a letter to Mr. Kilmer. Because as you see now, Mr. Kilmer, after Richard found out that he writes poetry and he is also a brave person, admirable. So for Richard, Mr. Kilmer is an idol, idola. idola. So he looks up to Mr. Kilmer. He admires Mr. Kilmer, right? So in his letter, Richard wrote about his interest, his love for poetry, and also his fear to share his interest. Why is it he fear? What is it that he fears? Why he is afraid to share his poem? Because he is afraid to be mocked and called a sissy. Takut kena kecam, takut kena kutuk, right? Aren't we all like that? When we have an interest, because it's different from other people, we tend to keep it a secret. We tend to, hide it from others, right? We are afraid. We are afraid of being mocked. Takut sangat kena kecam, right? So this is something that we can learn from Richard. So he becomes brave to share his fear, his uncertainty, his anxiety. So he shared it with his idol. Or maybe we still keep it a secret, whatever the secret is, because we haven't found an idol, someone that we can share it with. So Richard shared his interest, his love for poetry, and also his fear with his idol. And later, Richard received a letter from Mr. Kilmer. He didn't expect it at all. I mean, you send to someone popular, you don't expect him or her to reply back, right? But Mr. Kilmer is a nice person, and he replied to Richard. And in his letter to Richard, he praised Richard's poem, because in that letter, Richard also included a poem, right? So Mr. Kilmer praised the poem, and he encouraged Richard to share it with others. That's the right thing to do. When people tell you that they are afraid to do something, you need to motivate them. And that's what Mr. Kilmer did. So Mr. Kilmer tell Richard, go out there, share it with others. And that's what Richard will do. Let's see. So when you want to do something, you always start with, the smallest effort. We will start something small first. And we will start with people closer to us. And that's what Richard did. So he first shared it with his family. Unfortunately, the feedback that he received was negative. But it's true, isn't it? Sometimes our family members are the ones who always disappoint us. But doesn't mean that they are not good. No, not necessarily. It's just sometimes our own family does not understand us. And that's what happened to Richard, unfortunately. But it's okay. Doesn't mean that you cannot love your family members. You still love them despite the differences. So let's see the kind of reaction he received from his family members. We start with Gus. Gus is Richard's brother. And he was disgusted. Boy, he was disgusted with Richard. When he found out that Richard wrote poetry, when Richard writes poetry, he was like, "You, Richard, you are sissy. You are a sissy. Don't tell it to others. Don't let others know that you write poetry. Malu ngaku adik." Something like that. But this kind of reaction is something that is normal among siblings, isn't it? Right. When you have an older brother or an older sister, they always mock you. They always belittle you. Selalu memperkecilkan kamu, memperkotak-katikkan usaha kamu, isn't it? Right. You are never enough with your siblings. Buatlah apa pun, sentiasa dipandang rendah. And that's what happened. No matter how good Richard is, Gus always looks down on him. So, this is what was portrayed in the novel. And this is one of the reasons why I love this Dear Mr. Kilmer, because, the writer, the author, writes something that we can always relate to. And now let's look at Pa. So, Pa was unimpressed. Pa was like, poetry? What's that? Is it important? Pa doesn't really care. He was actually indifferent. He was unimpressed. And just like any parents, he said what any parent would say. He told Richard to focus on study and also on farming. So, he told Richard to focus on what's important. Think of your own experience. When you come back to see your parents and told them, Ma, Pa, I want to join this. I will be participating in this competition, whatever it is. And usually the reaction that they would give is, nak masuk lah. You want to join? Join. It's okay. As long as you focus on your study ya. Selagi pelajaran tak terganggu, masuklah. So it's something like that. And Pa was like that, right? And what about Angie? Angie was indifferent. Angie did not give any opinion. She said that she doesn't understand poetry. And this is understandable because, as I mentioned in not in the previous video, but in the the one before that, when I explained about the background of the novel. Back then, in early 1900, women were not well educated, and Angie, if you read the novel, you would understand why she said this, because she actually stopped school. Okay, she did not finish her study because she is the eldest in the family, and then Richard's mother passed away, and Angie had to take over the family. She had to take care of the family, so that's why she stopped going to school. So poetry, something that needs understanding, need deeper understanding. For Angie, she doesn't understand it, so she said, no, I don't know about this, don't ask me, right? So she was indifferent. So poor Richard, kesian Richard, right? Because his own family was indifferent, his own family gave negative feedback. So when your own family gives you negative feedback, what would you do? Do you give up? Well, most people would give up, but not Richard. Richard is determined because his own idol said, share it with others. Well, if my family doesn't like it, there are people who might like it. So Richard share it with another person. Who is it? Let's see. Yes, Richard went to see Mrs. Hanson, the person who introduced Richard to Mr. Kilmer. So he showed the letter from Mr. Kilmer as well as his own poem to Mrs. Hanson. And what was her reaction? Boy, she was impressed and proud of Richard. Because Mrs. Hanson, you see, is an English teacher. Any English teacher would be so proud of you if they find out that you write your own poetry, because it's not easy to write poetry. I myself write poetry, and I will be impressed whenever I find out that my own student writes poetry. I would appreciate it so much if they shared it, right? So she was impressed. She was so impressed and so proud of Richard that she asked Richard to share the letter as well as the poem in the class. Basically, she is giving a very big opportunity to Richard. So we can see how supportive Mrs. Hanson is. That's what most teachers are, or at least should be, right? So she offered Richard to share the poem and letter in the class. In fact, Mrs. Hanson also offered to help Richard to choose which poem to send next to Mr. Kilmer. You see, she is very kind and supportive. Everyone needs an English teacher, or rather a teacher like Mrs. Hanson. So the day finally came when Richard shared his poem and also Mr. Kilmer's letter in front of the class. This is a very courageous and brave act for Richard. I mean, how would you feel when you have to share something in front of the class? How would you feel when a teacher asks you, boy or girl, come and read it in front of the class? you will be sweating all over, isn't it? Because it's not something easy to go and stand in front of the class and share things with others. Even more so if what you are sharing is your own secret, something that you don't want people to know. So how would you feel? Scared, right? And that's why I say Richard is so brave. He was so brave because he shared his own fear, something that he's so afraid of people to know. Because he knew that some people would mock him, would say that he is a sissy. But to his surprise, Richard did not expect this at all. To his surprise, many students were impressed. Many students were impressed. I mean, actually, this is an easy mathematics for us because I personally believe, the reason why many students in the class, showed respect and were impressed by Richard, actually because of the letter from Mr. Kilmer. Remember earlier, Mrs. Hanson already introduced Mr. Kilmer to the class. She said all the nice things about Mr. Kilmer. So Mr. Kilmer is an artist now. He's a popular guy, for the students. So, that's why people were impressed that Richard is in touch with such a popular person, right? Take an example of, let's say, you writing a comment on a popular artist Instagram account, let's say BTS. So you see there is a post about a new album or a new single, and you commented there something, wow, what a splendid performance, something like that. If BTS like your comment, it already makes you crazy, isn't it? But what if you receive a reply, thank you, dear, thank you for supporting us? You would go even crazier and you're going to share it with all your friends, right? And all your friends would be jealous, and would they would want to talk to you because you are the popular person now, because you are in touch with a popular person. So that's what happened to Richard now, right? Many students were impressed. Many students think that, wow, Richard is, we don't expect this from Richard. And this also includes Peggy and Blanche, the popular girls. These popular girls, they like popular people. So when they know that Richard is in contact, in touch with a popular person like Mr. Kilmer, they also were impressed, and they also like Richard now, right? The only people who don't like it, well, can you guess? Obviously, the troublemakers, Abner and Harry. Of course, they were jealous. They were jealous of Richard. So that's why they don't like it, and they badmouth Richard. Right? They badmouth Richard. They were saying something like, alah, nasib je tu. Alah, tentang Mr. Kilmer tu tak popular pun. When you are jealous, of course you say all the bad things, right? So Richard, when he shared his poem, he earned respect from his classmates. Before this event, Richard was maybe a nobody. Nobody even look at Richard. He was a nobody, but then now he is a somebody. Everyone in the class respects him now. So, what is the significance of this sharing of poems by Richard? Well, this event shows us that Richard was very brave in two ways. The first one is he initiated correspondence with Mr. Kilmer and confessed about his problem. Well, why? Why do I say that this is a brave act? Well, how many of us, when we have a problem, we share it with others? How many of us have the courage to do that? Most of the time, we keep it to ourselves and we suffer it alone. So, Richard, he was lucky. He found someone he admires, someone he looks up to. So, begin he begins to have the courage, the bravery to share it his with his idol. So I hope that you whatever your problem is, whatever the worries you have, one day you will find someone you would have the courage to share it with, right? I pray that you will find someone like Mr. Kilmer with whom you can share your fears and worries, right? And the second reason why Richard was brave is because he shared his poem with others, despite knowing the fact that he would be mocked. As I have mentioned many times before in my previous videos as well, that poetry is considered a sissy stuff back in early 1900. Men shouldn't be writing poetry. They thought back then that poetry is for girls. It's a feminine stuff. But nah, not necessarily. So that's why for Richard to be sharing his poem, despite knowing that poetry was supposed to be a sissy stuff, Richard was brave, brani. And because Richard was brave, there were consequences. There were results from his bravery. So Richard was brave and determined to share his poems, and because of that, now he could openly write and share his poems. Right? Before this event, Richard wrote poetry in secret. Dia takut nak kongsi dengan orang kan. So he used to write in secrecy, but then now Richard can openly write it. He's not afraid anymore. He's not afraid to write poems. He is not afraid to share it with others anymore. He doesn't keep it to himself anymore. So that's why it's very important for us to share things with others. There's a saying that says that a problem shared is half solved. Maybe the problem is not solved yet, but at least for us, it's no longer a burden. So if you have a problem, share it with others. So as a result of Richard's bravery and determination, other than that, he made a new friend. Now he has a new friend, a trusted friend, and an admirable friend, Mr. Joyce Kilmer. And other than that, he also earned respect from his classmates. So you see, when you are brave and determined, you will get positive results. So be brave. Share your problem with others. But of course, you need to find someone you can trust. Don't simply share it with anyone or everyone. Find someone you trust first. That's your first step to share your problems. Now, let's look at the next event, which is the Liberty Bonds incident. If you still don't know what Liberty Bonds is, I would recommend that you go back and check my previous video about the things that you should know, about the novel Dear Mr. Kilmer. I explained it in length about what is Liberty Bonds. Okay, so this incident began when America joined the war against Germany. So if you remember in that video, I explained that the setting for this novel is during World War One, right? It was a war between the Central Power, the bad guys, which include Germany, against the Alliance, which include Britain and America. But at the start of the novel, America did not join the war yet. They were only sitting by the sidelines, giving support, only supporting the alliance. Mereka cuma berada di tepi dan memberi sokongan. But in April, in April, they finally joined the war. There's a date, I forgot. April, I forgot. I don't remember. But they finally joined the war. This is around chapter 6 or chapter 7. When Liberty Bonds incident happened. So America finally joined the war. That's why they were recruiting soldiers earlier. And that's why Mr. Kilmer joined and enrolled in the army, right? So when America joined the war, they needed money. And because they needed money, that's why Liberty Bonds were sold. I already explained this in my previous video. So Turtle Lake School organized a patriotic program to help sell Liberty bonds. Usually, this is what people do when they want to, to raise fund, nak kutip dana. Usually, what they would do is they organize an event, and Turtle Lake School organized a patriotic program. When a school organize a program, it is open to everyone, and when everyone comes, then there is a higher possibility chance that people would buy whatever we sell, right? So they organize a patriotic program to help sell Liberty bonds, and Mrs. Hanson held an essay writing competition to choose Lady Liberty and the Doughboy. So during the patriotic event, during the patriotic program, there would be a play. Mungkin ada lakonan or something, right? And the main characters are Lady Liberty and the Doughboy. What is it? Well, I'll show you later, soon after this. So, Mrs. Hanson held an essay writing competition, and the title was "What Can Students in Turtle Lake Do to Help with the War Efforts?" Jadi, apakah pelajar Turtle Lake boleh sumbangkan untuk peperangan, because students don't really have much money, right? So they can't possibly help with the Liberty bonds, but there must be something, there must be things that students can do. So that's what Mrs. Hanson wanted to find out. And why is it that Mrs. Hanson held this essay writing competition? Because the thing is, when students heard about teachers choosing Lady Liberty and the Doughboy, they were all saying that well, the popular guys and the popular girls will win this. Abner and Harry themselves, they were confident that they will win, uh, as well as the popular girls, Peggy and Blanche. They believed that they would win. So it would turn into a popularity contest. And Mrs. Hanson doesn't want this to happen. She wants to give a fair chance for every student to win. So Mrs. Hanson's want to let anyone to win this. Siapa-siapa yang layak, menang lah. Right? If you are worthy, then you will win. Not because you are popular. So Mrs. Hanson is a good person. So who is Lady Liberty? As you can see in the picture, she is a statue. Can be found in New York. It was built in the image of Libertas, a liberty goddess wearing a robe. So origin dia adalah Dewi Libertas. It was built to commemorate the date of the US Declaration of Independence. Ianya dibina untuk memperingati tarikh kemerdekaan Amerika. And it became an icon of freedom, menjadi lambang kebebasan. The word liberty itself means freedom, and it is seen as a symbol of welcome to immigrants arriving by sea. And who is the Doughboy? Look at the picture. The Doughboy, it was widely known, or it was a popular nickname for the American infantrymen during World War I. Infantrymen meaning foot soldiers, meaning tentera macam dalam gambar tu lah, like the one in the picture. So this uniform, this uniform is called the Doughboy. During World War II, America changed their uniform, and it's no longer called the Doughboy. So Americans are very proud of their soldiers, as I told you earlier. So because soldiers are considered as a symbol of courage and bravery, so that's why they are very respected. As for the competition, Richard won the Doughboy role. Well, this can be expected because he is the main role. So what did he write in his essay? He suggested to write to young American soldiers. Where do you think he got this idea? Well, it was based on his own experience writing letters to Mr. Kilmer. This is because through the correspondence, Richard learned that Mr. Kilmer sometimes felt lonely, sometimes felt discouraged when he was in the battlefield. So he thought that maybe the other soldiers would benefit from letters from students in Turtle Lake as well. So this is a good suggestion. So when Richard won this role, many students clap hands to show support. Remember earlier, Richard already earned respect from his classmates. So he is not a nobody anymore. So he is a somebody now. So when they see that Richard won the role, they clap their hands. Except, yes, you guessed it right. Except Abner and Harry. They were jealous of Richard because they thought that they should play the doughboy role because they were the popular boys. As for the Lady Liberty, Hannah won the role. So, what did she write in her essay? She wrote about her own experience being discriminated and facing prejudice. So, she wrote about making peace and to wage war against prejudice and discrimination because she said that the real enemy is not the war, but it's the prejudice, the discrimination. When people discriminate each other, that's the problem. That's what makes, that's the one that we should wage war against, right? So this is actually a very matured, a very wise piece of writing for a 15-year-old. That's very wise and very matured. However, nobody understood. In fact, I think not that nobody understood, but because they were discriminating her. They had the prejudice because the prejudice and discrimination were very strong in Turtle Lake then. So nobody clapped hands to show support to Hannah. Well, maybe not everyone was prejudiced towards her, but some of them were afraid of the troublemakers, except for one person, and one person alone, which is Richard. This is because Richard is Hannah's only friend in the class. The others were all just classmates. So when you are friends, be like Richard. Be a true friend like Richard. Show support to your friend in whatever situation. Many students were upset with Mrs. Hanson's decision to choose Hannah as Lady Liberty. Why do you think this is so? This is because for them, Hannah is a German, and at that time, Germany was an enemy. So they think of Hannah as an enemy. But this is wrong. Hannah is not a German. She is actually a German American, meaning to say that she is a German by race, berbangsa German, but she is an American citizen just like them. Alright? So this is a problem here because people were prejudiced towards Germans. Hannah herself was born in America. Her father and her mother came from Germany. In fact, it is actually ironic that they were against Hannah playing Lady Liberty because I personally think that Hannah is the perfect person to play Lady Liberty. Why? Remember earlier I showed you who is Lady Liberty? She is a symbol of welcome for immigrants to America. And who is Hannah? Her parents were immigrants, so she should be the perfect person to play Lady Liberty. However, due to prejudice and discrimination, people were against this idea. And it became a serious issue because some parents came to see the principal to complain. If there's any issue at school, if the parents do not come to see the principal, it's still okay. But if some parents begin to complain to the principal, it means that issue, whatever it is serious. However, Mrs. Hanson, despite all the pressure she get from other students as well as parents and probably from the principal as well, she was adamant. She was stubborn. Stubborn is a negative word here. Adamant. Dia tetap dengan pendirian. She was adamant with her decision because she said that Hannah won fair and square. So Hannah should play the role of Lady Liberty, not nobody else. Because of the complaints from both students and parents, Hannah finally decided to decline her role. Yes, she turned down her role. Dia tak jadi Lady Liberty. So she declined her role. Why? Because she realized that if she continued to play Lady Liberty, she would start a war in Turtle Lake. Imagine if she continued to play the role, then many people might boycott the whole program because they don't like the decision, they don't like Hannah, they don't like the Shermers playing Lady Liberty. So Hannah is a very matured girl. She was very thoughtful. So she declined her role. She was selfless. She thought about what would happen to others. Richard, when he found out that Hannah declined her role, he was shocked. He was shocked with this decision. So he asked Hannah, why did you decline your role? And Hannah said that I wanted peace. That's the content of her essay. Remember, she wanted peace. She suggested to make peace. So she said, I wanted peace, but I just started a little war in Turtle Lake. Such a profound and meaningful, thoughtful words coming from a 15-year-old girl facing a lot of difficulties in life. So Richard was touched by what his friend did. So he also declined his role to show his support for Hannah. This is a very selfless act on Richard's part, and this is the sign of a true friend. So this Liberty Bonds incident finally coming towards an end. At the end of this event, there are two consequences, there are two results that you should remember. The first one is Richard received two new nicknames. The first one is he was called unpatriotic. The reason for this is because he declined the doughboy role. Why was he called unpatriotic? Think of it this way. Let's say we have our Independence Day, right? Kita ada sambutan Hari Kemerdekaan, dan you are given the role of Tunku Abdul Rahman, right? The role of Tunku Abdul Rahman to shout Merdeka. But you turn down that role. You do not want that role. So you will be called unpatriotic. Kamu ni tak patriotic lah. And the second one, he was called a traitor. And this is because he supported his friend, Hannah, which is a German American. And the second result is friendship between Richard and Hannah became much closer and ever stronger. Other important things highlighted in this event is how serious prejudice and discrimination were in Turtle Lake. As we could see how people would start a war, people would riot against the decision of Hannah playing Lady Liberty. It's something small, something not that big, but people would go to the length of complaining to the principal. That's how serious prejudice and discrimination were in Turtle Lake. And it was all due to ignorance and fear. People were afraid of the Germans. They thought that German Americans like the Shermers were spies. They were ignorant. They don't understand what really happened, what's really happening. So people who were ignorant and afraid of things, they do bad things, just like Richard answered Hannah in chapter 2. However, some people were unaffected. Who were they? People like Richard, who believes in his own principle, who believes in the right things. And also in some educated people like Mrs. Hanson and Mr. Higby, the teachers. They understood the real situation. So they have nothing to fear against the German Americans like the Shermers. So that's why they were not prejudiced. They did not discriminate the Shermers. And this event also highlights Richard's bravery to stand up for what is right. So he knew that Hannah did not deserve discrimination. Hannah deserved the role, so he defended Hannah. So Richard did the right thing, and aren't we all? We all should do the right thing. Well, that's the end of this video actually. So what's next? We have our final part, which is part 3, where we will cover the dinner with the Shermers and also the death of Mr. Kilmer, the final 2 important events in this novel. Well, that's all folks. I'll see you again in my next video. Bye.